Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are taking on, well, basically the ultimate detective mystery. We're reopening a 1,000-year-old cold case. I mean, imagine trying to solve a catastrophic crash where the suspects, the witnesses, and the evidence have literally been missing for an entire millennium. Sounds impossible, right? Well, by combining ancient, cryptic texts with some seriously cutting-edge modern tech, researchers have done exactly that. We're going to look at the incredible forensic recreation of a doomed Viking voyage, and we'll see exactly how a massive shipwreck was just recently found, hiding completely in plain sight.
So our investigation begins with a really fascinating modern constraint. How on earth do you uncover a 1,000-year-old shipwreck without touching a single shovel? When the COVID-19 pandemic hit, physical excavations and travel were, as we all remember, completely shut down. So a researcher named Royce Haynes was forced to get highly resourceful. Unable to actually visit the proposed site up in Canada, he had to conduct what's basically a virtual excavation. He relied exclusively on logic, publicly available satellite imagery, and specially contracted drone and thermal imaging to scan the Earth. And what he found, using these non-invasive tools, it's honestly nothing short of breathtaking.
Okay, let's dive into this timeline so we understand exactly who we're tracking here. You see, the Vikings didn't just make one trip to North America. Back in 985 AD, Bjarni Herjolfsson accidentally detoured past Greenland and spotted some new land. Then, a bit later, in 1003 AD, the famous Leif Erikson purposely sailed there, discovered grapes, and named the area Vinland, building a base camp we now call Leif's Booths. And that brings us to our primary suspect, or subject really, Thorvald Eriksson, Leif's brother. In 1006 AD, Thorvald borrowed Leif's exact ship to do some exploring of his own. This was the second successful Vinland expedition, but as we're about to see, things took a very dark turn.
Now, to solve any mystery, we need witness testimony, right? But the only testimony we actually have comes from the cryptic Norse sagas, which were passed down orally for generations before anyone actually wrote them down. The Greenlanders Saga gives us an absolutely crucial three-sentence clue. It tells us Thorvald sailed north, hit a fierce gale off a headland, shattered the ship's keel, and spent a long time repairing it at a place he named Keelness. That's it. That is our ancient police report. So now we just have to figure out where on earth Keelness actually is. Let's look at the clues and map out our suspects' movements. Based on archaeological consensus, Leif's Booths was likely located in the Bay of Shelair area of New Brunswick. Now, the saga states Thorvald sailed east from there and then north along the coast. Tracking Thorvald's hypothetical trajectory eastward across the Gulf of St. Lawrence and then hanging a sharp left to head north places his ship directly on the western coast of Newfoundland. We are tracking him right into the danger zone.
Zooming in on that northward voyage, this stretch of Newfoundland's western coast is notoriously boring. It's just harborless limestone rock and sand. The Vikings actually called it Furdastrands, which translates to marvelous strands. They were seemingly using a bit of sarcasm there because it took so marvelously long to sail past. But while sailing up this coast, Thorvald was somewhat protected from the weather by the low land to his side. Unfortunately for him, that protection was about to run out very abruptly. Take a look at the prominent landmark sticking out on this nautical map. Cape Norman. It is a 61-foot-high promontory. The very moment Thorvald's ship rounded this exact cape, he lost all of his land protection and got hit by the full, terrifying force of a catastrophic coastal storm known as a nor'easter. A nor'easter is essentially a mini hurricane. The wind pinned him right against the shore, and lurking just beneath the crashing waves was a shallow, razor-sharp limestone reef, a submerged hazard that we know today as Priest Rock. So let's logically reconstruct the exact forensic sequence of this crash. Step 1, the ship rounds Cape Norman. Step 2, the nor'easter hits, totally trapping them against the coast. Step 3 is the fatal blow. Tacking back and forth, completely unable to steer, a massive storm swell picks the entire ship up and drops it directly onto Priest Rock. Ouch. Then, step 4, critically damaged and taking on a ton of water, the desperate crew limps the sinking vessel half a mile toward the relative safety of a small inlet called Bonnet Bay. Now, we've got to talk about the specific damage. The saga says the keel was shattered. You know, you don't just scratch a Viking keel by bumping into some sand. The keel is the massive oak backbone of the ship. We're talking an estimated 3 feet high and nearly a foot wide. Shattering a solid piece of timber that robust requires violent, blunt force trauma. Dropping the massive weight of a fully loaded ship straight down onto a submerged rock from the height of a giant ocean swell, Well, that is exactly the kind of catastrophic event that fits the description perfectly. And this brilliantly illustrates the horrific reality of that crash. When you compare the modern bay where the ship dragged across the sharp limestone reef with the underside of a reproduction Viking ship, you can really physically visualize the danger. Dragging across that rocky seabed wouldn't just break the keel, it would completely shred the wooden planks, called strakes, on the bottom of the hull. Forensic analysis suggests the bottom 9 strakes on both sides of the ship were completely pulverized, almost all the way up to the waterline. Frankly, it's a miracle they didn't sink immediately. So, now we transition from ancient disaster to modern discovery. The virtual search for the repair site, Keelness, relies on one absolutely crucial piece of logic. A tired crew is not going to drag a massive, broken, 90-foot ship very far from where they beached it. It's just way too heavy. Knowing this, the investigator used Google Earth to rigorously scan the immediate coastline of that bay, looking for any lingering geometric footprint that simply shouldn't occur in nature. After weeks and weeks of scanning, the investigator finally spotted a ghostly echo. It was a highly unusual zebra stripe pattern hiding right there in the vegetation. Now, you might be wondering, why would it look like this? Well, researchers believe an early heavy frost damaged the modern vegetation unevenly because of what is buried underneath it. It's this faint, delicate signal of human activity from 1,000 years ago, indicating that something highly structured is hiding just beneath the soil. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the technological leap. Because of COVID restrictions, remember, the investigator couldn't just grab a shovel and dig. Instead, he hired a drone operator to scan the site with advanced topographical and thermal sensors. And when you compare that initial fuzzy satellite hunch with the resulting drone hillshade data, which maps ground contours in incredible 3D detail, the forensic payoff is huge. The drone completely validates the satellite image. Those parallel lines aren't a trick of the light. They are a distinct, massive man-made structure. So what exactly are we looking at here? We're looking at the anatomy of the stocks. To repair a ship of this size, you can't just lay it in the mud. You have to build a perfectly leveled foundation. The data reveals trenches for 22 massive wooden beams known as sleepers, laid out parallel to each other. Each beam is over 50 feet long, creating a support grid stretching 135 feet across the beach. This immense, organized scale tells us they were repairing an absolute leviathan of a ship, likely around 90 feet long. This detailed 3D drone mapping represents the ultimate virtual excavation. It didn't just find the stocks, it revealed the entire 1,000-year-old crime scene. You can clearly see the slipway where they hauled the ship out of the water. You can see a massive depression dubbed the keel hole, where they likely rested the shattered keel. You can even see depressions shaped exactly like the damaged strakes they had to replace. Every single piece of this geographic puzzle perfectly aligns with those 3 little sentences from the ancient saga. So the crucial point is the number you see right here, 14. This astonishing, newly mapped ship repair site is exactly 14 miles away from Land's Meadows. And, for those who might not know, Land's Meadows is the only officially authenticated Viking settlement in all of North America. To find a massive Viking ship repair yard a mere 14 miles away from the premier Viking base camp, that is no coincidence. It securely ties Thorvald's epic struggle directly into the established historical record. This entire investigation brilliantly demonstrates the power of bridging disciplines. On one hand, we've got the ancient sagas, stories that are so often dismissed as mere myths or exaggerated campfire tales. But on the other hand, we have modern science, satellites, drones, and thermal imaging. By trusting the old stories enough to test them with new tools, we have likely pinpointed Keelness. And if this gets validated by future physical digs, it will be the very first specifically named Viking site ever identified in the Americas. How cool is that? Which leaves us with a truly mind-boggling thought. If a massive 1,000-year-old shipwreck and repair yard was sitting virtually untouched, just 14 miles away from the most famous archaeological site in Canada, what else is out there? What other ancient secrets are hiding in plain sight, trapped in the frost in the soil, just waiting for the right satellite to pass over them? Keep learning, keep looking closely at the world around you, and thanks for joining me on this explainer.